Now, members, I'll move House File 5217 to be in front of us. This is our bill, going to be our finance bill for this year, and I will ask the staff to walk through the overview in the spreadsheet. Who's going first? Ms. Roberts.
Mr. Chair and members, you should have the spreadsheet in your packet. I will go through this pretty quickly, so let me know if you have questions afterwards. The first agency is the Department of Labor and Industry and the Labor Standards Division. This is where the general fund spending in DLI is. You can see there's a tails correction related to last year's bill for the DHS Nursing Home Standards Board. There is $141,000 in one-time funding for Representative Nelson's private sector personnel records bill, $56,000 for an operating adjustment, and then $200,000 in one-time money that's for education and training related to the misclassification of employees bill. For the Workplace Safety Division, $279,000 from the Workers' Compensation Fund related to the acceptable blood levels for workers bill. There's no net costs for the Combative Sports Division technical fix. For the construction codes for House File 42, there is $707,000. That's for a major rulemaking and a building durability study. And then finally, the last item in Dolly is the contractor recovery fund, the governor's recommendation for increase to that cap. For the Bureau of Mediation Services, the governor's recs were no net costs. You'll see language in the bill related to that. The next item is the bill we just heard, the Tending the Soil, $9 million. And the one thing I want to point out that this is from the general fund, the bill we just heard, and the language in the bill says from the Workforce Development Fund, so we'll need to correct that with an amendment. And then the final spending item is the Department of Health, $174,000, again, for the blood level for safety for workers bill. Moving down to the bottom of the spreadsheet, you'll see the total general fund. Spending is $9.571 million, as the chair mentioned. That was the recently amended target for this committee.
And Ms. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I am going to go over the language in House File 5217 as amended. There is a summary in your packets that goes into all of this in more detail, and I'm happy to answer any more questions. So Article 1 are the appropriations that Ms. Roberts just went over. Article 2 is the combative sports provision that contains language from House File 5224 from Chair Nelson. That increases the maximum payment from the Contractor Recovery Fund and makes a variety of policy and technical changes. Article 3 has construction codes and licensing language. That's made up of two bills, House File 5338 from Representative Nash and House File 4242 from Representative Kraft. Those provisions would require the commissioner to adopt a more efficient residential energy code in line with the International Energy Code Conservation Code, as well as to allow recovery from the Contractor Recovery Fund for swimming pool installation. Article 4 is the language from the underlying vehicle bill, House File 5217 from Chair Nelson, and that contains the Bureau of Mediation Services, the language related to the appropriation changes in Article 1, in relevant part, repealing the laws and rules for the Labor Management Committee grant program and requiring BMS to pay for the peace officer grievance arbitrator training. Article 5 is the Pell Roll article from House File 3415, which is a Representative Jordan bill. This article makes several policy and technical changes to modernize language and provide additional clarity. Article 6 is the University of Minnesota Collective Bargaining Units. That is from House File 4508, a Representative Jordan bill, and that amends power provisions to allow employees, including student employees, more flexibility in their bargaining units. Article 7 has 3 miscellaneous labor provisions. This article is made up of House File 4994, from Representative Coulter, and that has prevailing wage requirements related to the TIF financing and construction exemption. It also has House File 3522, the personnel records language from Chair Nelson, and then the House File 4713 from Representative Coran, which requires rulemaking related to the workplace blood lead level standards. Article 8 is about broadband and pipeline safety. This article is made up of House File 4659 from Representative Berg and House File 4626 from Representative Hapke. And together, these provisions establish and modify safety-related provisions for broadband, internet installation, and pipeline infrastructure. Article 9 is Representative Greenman's House File 4444, the employee misclassification prohibited. Just high level, some of the changes in that bill on the misclassification provisions are found in Section 7 and 8 have the substantive provisions for general employee misclassification as well as construction employee misclassification. There's a new multi-part independent contractor test for building construction and improvement services, and it also creates a multi-agency intergovernmental misclassification enforcement and education partnership. Say that fast. Sections 13 to 25 then make related changes in the construction codes and licensing as that pertains to employee misclassification. And finally, Article 10 is from House File 3488, Representative Stevenson, and that provides regulations, compensation, and enforcement provisions related to minors appearing on the internet on platforms where the content generates compensation. So that was very high level and very quick. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions, Representative Myers?
Thank you, Chair. Just for staff, can you define what compensation is on Representative Stevenson's bill? Does that mean, somebody using a child to get donations? I'm just wondering what.
Ms. James?
Mr. Chair, Representative Myers, I will need to pull up the language and see if there's a specific definition for compensation. I can do that now. You can come back.
Okay.
Representative Myers?
And then I do have another question, and this won't be like last night, but would Representative Jordan yield for a question?
Representative Jordan, yeah, go ahead, ask your question.
From your collective bargaining on the University of Minnesota, has anything changed from what was previously brought forward to what it is in here now?
Representative Jordan?
Mr. Chair, Representative Meyer, no.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Further questions? Representative Schultz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to kind of ask a little bit about a couple of the broadband components that we saw earlier this year, and it looks as though, and I could have it wrong, but it looks as though we have both broadband pieces of legislation that I think we heard just, what was it, last week or 2 weeks ago. Is that true? Are they both components included in that?
My understanding is yes. My understanding that they are working, both of them are working with the general public and the people that are interested in this bill, and we're trying to work it together. And we're, hopefully, by the time we pass this off the floor, we'll have consensus, peace in the valley language between the two bills.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually appreciate hearing that because I'm a bit concerned with the two bills that had been put forward and how they might be in competition with one another in essence, and the fact that I think that especially if put together could result in higher fees and costs to consumers. So those are a few things that I just wanted to get clarity on. Thanks.
Any other questions? Representative Mecklin, did
I already raised my hand for him.
Okay, I didn't see. I see you on the list here.
Okay.
I'm looking over there. I wasn't looking at the list.
Fair enough. Department of Labor, if somebody from the Department of Labor could answer a question for me, potentially, and it goes to this including pool installers to the recovery fund.
I actually got testifiers, so Ms. Peruchek want to come down? She can maybe answer your question, and then Give her
perha-
testimony, yeah.
Or, Mr. Chair, or perhaps Mr. O'Neill, because I have a couple of questions regarding this.
Welcome to the committee, and why don't we do this? Why don't you we'll hold that question. We'll let them give their testimony. I've got 4 people on the list here. I got ahead of myself. And then maybe they can answer your question with their testimony. Welcome, Ms. Bruchek. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Kate Prushek, and I'm Deputy Commissioner at the Department of Labor and Industry. I'm pleased to be here today to speak in support of several provisions of House File 5217, the Labor Supplemental Budget Omnibus Bill. I'd like to thank you, Chair Nelson, for including the department's supplemental budget priorities in the bill. These priorities include modifications to the Contractor Recovery Fund, the Office of Combative Sports Statutes, and important measures to help combat employer misclassification fraud. The Contractor Recovery Fund, which is funded by a fee on residential building contractor licenses, compensates owners or lessees of residential property in Minnesota who have suffered an actual and direct out-of-pocket loss due to a licensed contractor's fraudulent, deceptive, or dishonest practices. Increasing the maximum amount a homeowner can receive from the fund from $75,000 to $100,000 will allow homeowners to recover more of their out-of-pocket loss when a licensee fails to perform their contractual obligation, while protecting the financial health of the fund. The combative sports changes in House File 5217 are intended to better protect combatant safety and health, and include technical fixes to the law that passed last year, clarifications of regulatory authority for youth events, the addition of basic experience requirements for individuals looking to be licensed as a combatant, fee calculation adjustments, as well as allow DLI to share combatant medical records with ringside physicians and doctors performing the pre-bout exam. Finally, the bill includes measures to combat employer misclassification fraud. When employers misclassify workers as independent contractors, workers miss out on basic workplace protections, such as the right to unemployment insurance, workers' compensation coverage, overtime, minimum wage, earned sick and safe time, and more. The provisions in this bill will give the department the tools necessary to combat employer misclassification fraud and require the agencies responsible for misclassification enforcement, as well as the Attorney General's office, to coordinate their efforts. I did want to comment on a few additional provisions in the bill. First, I appreciate that Representative Kraft consulted with the department on the residential energy code changes in House File 4242, included in Article 3, Section 1 of the omnibus bill, and addressed concerns we raised as the bill progressed through committee. The version included in the omnibus, however, neglects to delete a sentence about site energy use intensity on lines 13.9 and 13.10 that was amended out in the Climate and Energy Committee. We recommend the Labor Committee similarly delete this sentence to match action taken in the Climate and Energy Committee. Also in Article 3, the department has concerns with the inclusion of House File 5338 in the omnibus, which modifies eligibility for compensation from the Contractor Recovery Fund to include faulty work or negligence related to private residential swimming pool installations. While we see the benefit to licensure for pool installers, we have concerns about broadening the definition of residential real estate to include pools. As the agency responsible for the health and solvency of the Contractor Recovery Fund, DLI thinks it is important to preserve use and access to the fund for its current purpose, compensating homeowners who are harmed by a licensed contractor's fraudulent or deceptive practices related to home construction or improvement, which supports housing stability and consumer protection. Finally, the department does have an amendment suggestion for Article 8, Section 3 of the bill related to certification standards for underground telecommunication installers. We would like to see the commissioner's role in certification standards for underground telecommunication installers to be the approval of standards on line 37.22 rather than the development of standards. We want to recognize that proponents of the bill have been engaging the department on this proposal and are aware of this suggestion. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify.
And I'd just like to point out that the sentence on the craft portion of the bill, that because it didn't get engrossed, because it was heard in the Environment Committee, Energy Committee, because it was adopted there, but because the bill was laid over and didn't get re-engrossed, the language we put in the bill, the delete all, was a mistake or it was wrong, and we're going to correct that in the author's amendment going forward. So, and Representative Mecklin, if you want to ask your question for the two here, and then we'll get to our other three testifiers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think you just kind of touched on part of this when it comes to swimming pools. And based on what we heard, I mean, these stories are awful, which we heard the other day, where people were taken for a lot of money. However, I think you're touching on exactly where my concern lies, that at what point do we add landscaping and fence installers and everything under the sun that, you know, you can spend a lot of money on some of those on landscaping. And while it's very unfortunate, but like the solar, when we added solar, it was only the solar that was directly attached to the roof of this primary structure. If you want to put solar panels out in your yard, that wouldn't fall into play. That's where my concern comes in, that we're broadening what this was designed for. And, you know, the home is a necessity, the pool is a want. And it's unfortunate, but we saw the same thing in these other cases, and that was my exact concern that I wanted to raise. So I'm glad you addressed that, and hopefully that can get worked out, because I do find it concerning. I mean, I don't know how many pool installers there are, but when you have that few of contractors that specialize in that, but it's that big of a ticket item, you know what I'm saying? It seems like when you look at the number of, I'm not sure what the current license holder numbers are. It used to be 15,000 back in the early 2000s, but after 2008 it dropped down. But, you know, there's a lot of resource putting into it, with luckily very few claims coming out of it. But you start adding all these specialty things, and I would be concerned that it would have the risk of depleting it rapidly. So that's all I had, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
We'll go on the rest of our testimony, and unless you have an answer.
Mr. Chair, Representative Meckland, thank you for raising that concern. While we are similarly sympathetic to the homeowners who had these problems with their pool installations, we are worried about that slippery slope, and if you add pools, what's next? So thank you.
Thank you. The next person on my list is John Thorson. Welcome to the committee. State your name for the record.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is John Thorson. For the record, my name is John Thorson. I'm Legislative Director for LIUNA, Minnesota, North Dakota. We're a union of 14,000 men and women who build and maintain our state's critical infrastructure. I'm here today to support three provisions of House File 5217 as amended, in particular Sections 1 and 2 of Article 7, Article 8, and Article 9. First, Article 7, Sections 1 and 2. We believe this provision will ensure that capital projects funded through tax increment financing or receive support through construction material sales tax exemption are covered by prevailing wage in a manner that's consistent with similar projects supported by state bonding or receiving tax credits for economic development purposes. Doing so will level the playing field for high road contractors by increasing transparency through certified payroll reporting, and provide state and local governments with the most effective tool for preventing the intentional misclassification of construction workers. In Article 8, this establishes guardrails to ensure that broadband is not being deployed at the expense of worker safety, public safety, or in ways that compromise critical gas, electric, water, and telecommunications infrastructure. Does so by establishing a basic safety training standard for the installation of broadband, similar to what exists today for pipe laying in Minnesota, and it holds bad actors accountable for damage to critical underground utility infrastructure when broadband is installed. This provision raises quality and safety standards, it enhances worker training, seeks to reduce workforce turnover, and helps ensure that public investments in broadband will deliver middle-class jobs in every corner of the state. I want to thank Vice Chair Berg for authoring this provision. As she's instructed, we continue to have productive engagement with important stakeholders in this space, including MREA, the Telecom and Cable Associations, DLI, the Office of Broadband Development, Commissioner Verlick, and we're all working toward raising transparency, training, safety standards of broadband deployment throughout the state. Article 9 addresses the misclassification of workers, which is a widespread and pervasive practice in the construction industry today. The intentional misclassification of workers is so prevalent in construction because the financial incentives to do so are too great and the tools of enforcement are not adequate. It's reported that over 20% of Minnesota's construction workers are either misclassified as independent contractors or paid off the books. Bottom line, contractors who misclassify workers are not contributing to payroll taxes, UI, or workers' comp. It's a fraudulent business practice that allows them to underbid law-abiding contractors, whether they're union or not, who play by the rules and have high-road business practices. I want to thank Representative Greenman, the Attorney General, Commissioner Blissenbach, for creating more tools to prevent the unlawful exploitation of workers in Minnesota's construction industry. In summary, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I want to thank you for assembling a strong omnibus bill and look forward to being a resource on the provisions I spoke to as the bill progresses.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next person I have on my list is Jake Switzer. Welcome to the committee. State your name for the record and then proceed.
Thank you, Chair Nelson. Members of the committee, my name is Jake Schweitzer. I am the Executive Director of North Star Policy Action. We are a think tank that promotes data-driven solutions to help working Minnesotans thrive. And I'm here today to speak in favor of Article 8 of House File 5217. In 1998, a crew installing broadband cable for high-speed internet in downtown St. Cloud struck a gas line and caused an explosion that killed 4 people and destroyed 6 buildings. More than 25 years later, too little has changed. Just last month, a broadband installation crew working just blocks away from that same site of the 1998 explosion struck an underground phone line, requiring an emergency repair. Our analysis shows that this is no coincidence. Using the most comprehensive data set available, the Common Ground Alliance's DIRT data, we find that broadband and other telecom digging was responsible for 1,385 strikes to underground utilities between 2020 and 2022. This amounts to more than 1 strike per day and accounts for the largest share of damage to underground infrastructure among all industries in the state. When this damage occurs, telecom is hitting essential services with potentially dangerous consequences. Nearly half of all damage caused by telecommunications installation was to natural gas pipelines, such as the one struck in the St. Cloud explosion. While troubling, 2 additional points make this reality even scarier. First, telecommunications installation accounts for fully 60% of damage caused to underground infrastructure during directional drilling. Horizontal directional drilling is a construction technique whose purpose is to minimize disturbance and damage associated with excavation. While electric and gas utility crews operate relatively safely, hitting natural gas lines about once a month during directional drilling operations, telecom installers average 2 gas line strikes per week, accounting for 6 times more damage than their peers working for gas or electric utilities. Second, the amount of broadband installation is poised to accelerate significantly. While the state has spent roughly $35 million per year over the last 10 years on broadband installation, an influx of federal money means this total is set to jump to $130 million per year in the next 5 years. As a result, the safety issues uncovered in our analysis are likely to intensify substantially in the near future unless meaningful reforms are passed. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
Thank you for your testimony. The last person I have on my list is Dr. Glassingheim. Again, welcome to the committee. State your name for the record.
Good afternoon, Chair Nelson and members. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Dr. Tracy Blassenheim. I've worked at the University of Minnesota for over a decade. And during that time, I've taught countless students, educated them on U.S. foreign policy and global affairs. I've helped them land jobs and grad school admission and have secured tens of thousands of dollars in research grants for my university. Yet because of PELRA, I'm classified as staff, not faculty, and my job is defined by precarity. I work on last-minute, short-term contracts for unlivable pay, and I have no academic freedom protections or benefits of really any kind. In any other workplace, I would be able to organize with my colleagues to address this problem. Yet because I work at the University of Minnesota, that is impossible. The law makes it impossible. If the esteemed members could please find the document, bargaining unit 11 at the front of their packets, our large packet of letters, you will be able to see this problem for yourselves. This is my mandated unit under PELRA. If it's hard to read, I can assure you it was even harder to fit on a single double-sided sheet. To form a union, my colleagues and I would have to organize thousands of staff specialists in HR, IT, athletics, marketing, student services, and plenty more from all across the U's 5 campuses. But not faculty instructors. PELRA puts them in Unit 8. We teach the same courses, but we are barred by the law from bargaining together. This unit, Unit 11, is just one of 4 gerrymandered bargaining units in PELRA. Together, these units put collective bargaining out of reach for over 2/3 of the U of M workforce. Thankfully, Article 6 of this bill offers a common sense solution to this mess. It removes these extraordinary barriers and lets us play by the same rules as other public sector workers. Over 2,000 employees at the U in the last month and a half have signed a petition urging you, our representatives, to end this state-sanctioned union busting. Our need is urgent, but our request is quite simple. Unrig PELRA and restore our right to decide if we want a union. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Ms. James, did you get an answer to the question for Representative Myers?
Mr. Chair, Representative Myers, so in Article 10, there is not a definition for compensation. In Section 4 of Article 10, it talks about how minors appearing in content are to be compensated. It talks about that they will receive 100% of the profits on video content if they appear at all. So I would take that to mean any of the profits from a video being distributed. I don't know if that's clicks or what that would mean, but it is not defined explicitly in the bill.
Representative Myers.
Yeah, thank
You're
you.
the first person I have on my list anyway, so
Okay,
Representative Myers.
yeah, and thank you for that. I'm just wondering if there may be some clarifying language for, nonprofits or somebody that are using, youth programs, something like that, if that may be a consideration that we can look at. I do have a follow-up question for the Deputy Commissioner, if she's willing to answer a question.
I see her heading down to the table. Ms. Peruchek. Representative Myers.
The question I have, I was at a soccer game with my kids this weekend, and a parent came up to me and was talking about, a long process they've been going through with a builder for years and years and years. They were talking about the amount of money that they probably are going to lose, and they're, concerned with how far they can push it versus what they can recover under the recovery fund. So one of the questions I have was, you talked about somewhat of a balance to go from 75,000 to 100,000. Can you kind of explain a little bit of that to make sure you had said the fund would need to stay liquid? I'm trying to figure out how that number came about.
Ms. Peruchek.
Absolutely. I'm just trying to find the fiscal note quickly. I know I brought it with me. So, Mr. Chair, Representative, between 2019 and FY23, there were 54 claims that were submitted at or above 75,000. 20 were for exactly 75,000. 24 were greater or equal to 100,000, and then there were 10 that were between 75,000 and 99,000. So we thought raising it from 75,000 to 100,000 was really the sweet spot based on the experience and the number of claims and the amounts they were submitted for. So using the ratio of those 34 total claims providing total losses greater than 75,000 over the last 4 years, we're estimating that there would be 11 claims annually, exceeding that 75,000 with an additional average payout of 20,738 for each claimant. And I think I'd mentioned in my prior testimony that that would be an estimated impact to the fund of $228,000 annually.
And that, Ms. Perisic, those have to be licensed contractors paying into the fund to be able to collect against them.
That is correct.
Yeah, thank you.
Myers.
Thank you. You know, it was timely that they were talking to me about it and the fact that, you know, that their damage is going to be way higher than $100,000. And so I really feel for them. And, you know, we've seen with home prices how expensive it is. It doesn't leave some of these people with a lot of opportunities. I appreciate you sharing that. I appreciate that you're raising the dollar amount. I just was rather shocked to hear from, you know, a constituent of, you know, what they're probably going to be out and how they're going to have to deal with that financially. So thank you.
No further questions. Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do also have a question for the Deputy Commissioner. And kind of going back to that broadband language, working with stakeholders, just a kind of a question based upon the words that you used just a moment ago. What did you mean by approval rather than development as it relates to the broadband installer certification standards?
Ms. Perisic.
Right, so thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe it's on line 33.7 I had said.
Did you say 33.7?
7,
Of the Toledo.
correct. It was actually, let's see, 37.22. So in the certification standards section, there are 3 responsibilities for the commissioner. So again, if you look at line 37.21 to .22, the Commissioner of Labor and Industry shall develop standards for a safety qualified underground telecom installer. And then what follows, the subsequent list, are various requirements that would be included in that program. And we feel that DLI is not really equipped to be the one to develop those standards. We would prefer that an outside entity experienced would develop those standards, and we would approve them.
Got it. Sorry.
Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know what? I actually think, based upon what you described, I think that is the route that I would suggest as well. And I appreciate your comments and would just continue your collaboration in your work with the stakeholders on this. I think I did have one other question, if I can find it here. Oh, and this might be for you, it may be for Representative Greenman, but I wanted to find if there has been any substantial changes to what was House File 4444 and the worker misclassification, or if there are ongoing discussions that are currently being had.
Rep. Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Schultz. And the 4444 was in Ways and Means yesterday, and we just sent it to the General Register. I think, and this should include the language, we made some revisions after we went from labor to judiciary, particularly around the contracting provisions. And so I can show you those. I believe that they're reflected in the current language around the written contract after a lot of feedback, actually, from both builders, from some developers, and from some of the associations. I think there's a few pieces that I think, including the effective date, that we're looking at, but other than that, I feel pretty confident about the bill.
And I see Ms. James shaking your head, agreement for what Representative Greenman said, so.
So I can be sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, obviously, I do continue, or just encourage collaboration. It sounds like you still have a few different things, but look forward to getting that language in its final form and seeing what we have here, and trying to understand it as best we can. Was there any testimony to that today, or folks on that particular topic that are here that would want to provide some insight?
Nobody signed up on the list, and I don't see anybody rushing down here right now, so. Lots of good letters. There's a lot of letters in there.
I'll have to review these letters, Mr. Chair, as I continue to learn about this subject area. Thank you.
Representative Mecklen, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a couple quick ones. Of course. Thank you, Mr. Chair. When the testimony by Jake Schweitzer was given, he indicated that the broadband, there's 6 times more strikes within underground installation. And I guess my question, it might go to the deputy commissioner as well. Right now, we obviously, I mean, I can drive around where I live, and there is a lot of broadband being installed everywhere. I don't see gas companies out there putting anything in. I don't see phone companies putting anything in. I mean, well, they may be putting in broadband, but all of that pretty much is already there. So I have to believe, I would like to think that because there is so much broadband, obviously the numbers are going to be higher of incidents because that's the only thing going in. But in this, where does the locate companies factor into this? And the responsibility or the errors within their responsibility to actually properly mark and identify versus is it the installer that's out there using directional boring, or is it being mismarked by the locates?
So
Schweitzer.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Representative, thank you for the question. The data we're looking at here doesn't lay fault on locate or anyone else. It's simply by industry performing the work. That being said, given the tremendous delta in industry by industry, I think it would be fair to assume that if there is an error rate on locates, it's probably consistent across who the installer is, right? So if there is a certain percentage of error rate on locates, to make up a number, this isn't, let's say 10%, that would be consistent if you are installing a gas line versus installing a broadband line. I would be surprised if locates are, for whatever reason, much more error prone on broadband installation than something else. Does that make sense?
Representative Mecklen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not really. I thought you were going one way, then I thought like you were going the other. So when I call for locates, I don't get to choose who does that. That's all done. I don't know who decides for go for one. But this has been a problem over the last 5-6 years. There was a big transportation project on 94, and it was a massive project, and they claimed they did the locates when they had not. And which was ironic because that particular contractor had called me about it, and I was literally sitting at my computer, and I had already put my footings in on a deck project, and 2 weeks prior, because they had closed out the locates, and on that day, one of the utilities got back to me saying they had just completed it, which it had already been reported 2 weeks prior. Mm-hmm. So, and I know some of these broadband installers where, and I can drive around anywhere in my area and I see all the flags out there, all the paint, everything. In fact, my driveway still has it on there. But to me, it seems that, I'm not saying that the installers may occasionally make a mistake, but the locates are everything. So if you don't have data showing the errors of the locating people, how can you say it all comes down to the installation people when we have to solely go off what they mark?
Mr. Chair,
Dr. Schweitzer.
not a doctor, but thank you.
Schweitzer,
Mr. Chair, Representative, I was certainly not meaning to absolve the role of locates in this. We know that's an issue. My point was that, again, given what our data shows that, there is a much larger number of accidents happening in telecom installation than in other installation. I would also say it would be unfair to solely blame the locates for that. There's a difference happening in the quality of installation between these industries. That is what's concerning us, and I believe driving the dramatic differences between industries here.
Representative Mecklen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So do you have data that would show?
I see he's getting a phone friend.
Okay.
So
Mr. Schweitzer.
My colleague and research director says that the data does show, and forgive me if we didn't include this in the write-up, but I'm happy to follow up here with the data that we're relying on, does show that more than half of the data is due to excavation practices. Less than half of the data is due to errors in locate. So happy to follow up with you specifically on that data point, as that's your interest.
Representative Mecklin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that's good to know. I mean, because I believe it was 5 or 6 years ago, there was a big change in who was being contracted to do the locates. I'm looking to see if either of the Department of Labor people remember this. But I know we were having significant issues whenever that change occurred because they were contracted out of an outstate something, as best I recall. And they certainly didn't have the same timeliness manners. They were not very, I mean, there was significant issues that continued on for quite some time. In fact, even when they just did it they came down our road, they painted the power line right down the middle of my driveway, which I've had it done there enough times that I know where the power line is, because they were going to tear up my entire asphalt driveway. And I made them redo the locates and bring them back out, and I was correct. It's 10 feet to the north. It doesn't even touch the asphalt. So that is a part of a concern. Going back to what you said about when it comes to telecom, they're having higher rates of incident. Do you have the data showing how many miles of gas line, how many miles of all these other utilities are put in last year compared to how many miles of telecom?
I do not have that in front of me and can try and follow up on that if that's available.
Representative Mecklin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That would be very beneficial because from what I'm seeing out there, and I see all these companies, they're all laying broadband right now. There's no new gas lines going in. There's no new, all these other things. Obviously, where I am, the power lines are pretty much mostly overhead until it drops down and for the feeder going into the house. But that's all pretty much there except for new construction. So when you're going down these right-of-ways, the easements, or whatever I'm trying to think of, where there already is all these utilities, it would make sense that there's obviously a lot more because everybody else is already in place. So I'm not justifying them, but there's a lot of factors involved here. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, if I may
Mr. Schweitzer.
respond on that point briefly. Great point. I'll also say that that work is going to accelerate as we find federal investment in broadband installation is increasing significantly over the next few years. And that is also a concern on this side. If this accident rate, remains steady as the infrastructure investment increases, one would assume that accident rate is going to increase at broadband installation as well. So now, we believe now would be the time to get ahead of this with some change in safety standards and training standards before this work increases even more than it already has. But thank you for the time.
Seeing no further questions, members, you can, when you put your stuff back in the packet, we're going to, this is, we're going to need these same ones for next week, or not for Thursday, I should say. Amendments are due 1 o'clock tomorrow, the bill, to the delete all. And so like I said, keep your things in your folder from today. We're going to come back to it.